and we're off to the allotment. Hi, my name's Malcolm and this is Allotments for Fun and Food. Why not support my channel by subscribing, clicking the bell and selecting all, and then you'll be notified of all my updates, which I try to do once a week, and occasionally I'll drop another video midweek to give you an update. Today we're going to look at planting on my seeds, transplanting from the seed trays, and a few trials that we're going to put in place to see what works best. Here's an update on the seeds that I've been growing. The peppers have been in since December. You can see they're doing really well. So today I'm going to take them out of those trays. Should be fairly straightforward because they're very well spaced, and we'll be potting those on. This is the January sown lavender. You can see that it's got 3 successful germinations, and the Joe's Long, absolutely nothing at the moment. I'm beginning to think that this is a risk with the Joe's Long, so I think what I'm going to end up doing is sowing some seeds on some tissue paper, some kitchen towel, and to see if I can get some germination from a bulk load of the saved seed, and then perhaps plant up the successful germinations from that. The lavender, I think probably we'll get more of them up. You can see I've removed the onions for good reason. The onions don't need the heat that's currently in here, 27 degrees, so I've moved those out, and I'd ideally now like to stop heating the peppers, but I'm just going to wait until that germination's taken place with the lavender and the peppers, hopefully. So the onions have come into what was my traditional lit seed area. This is a grow light garden which is made by Garland, and this of course doesn't have the heat. You can see that we've actually got 20 degrees in this room, and they're growing well, and they've been out of the Vitapod now for a few days. This is a really successful light garden. As you can see, it's got the capillary matting on, which is very damp, and the capillary matting goes over the edge of a tray, which then sits into the bottom tray, and the bottom tray's full of water, so you've got this constant well of water that's feeding this capillary mat and subsequently the onions. So the onions too are going to come out today and be potted on, and we're going to do a couple of trials and treat these onions in slightly different ways and see what difference it makes, and I'll come on to that a little later. Here are the seedlings ready to transplant. We're going to use a variety of pots to move these on. We use these root trainer pots, which are fantastic for really good strong root growth, and they come in two varieties. They come in a longer cell than this, and this short one serves the purpose of transplanting onions in clusters, which we're going to do some of. They sit in this rack quite nicely when they're full of compost, and the top just goes over the top to act like a propagator. And what we're going to do is a trial where we're going to maintain some of these onions indoors under the light in the garden light, and we're going to move some outside into the polytunnel. Now, it's stated quite clearly that once you get to this level with onions, that they are quite resistant to the cold, and we're just going to put that to the test. Here in the South Wales valleys we can get down to -10 in the polytunnel, and we're just going to see what impact that has. Here is the three elements to the root trainer: the cells, the rack, and the plastic lid, which can be used as a propagator. Each of the sections has 4 cells within it. They simply fold up like this. Each cell interlocks at the top, a bit like a jigsaw, and then it simply slots into the rack, and so on and so forth until you fill the rack with what turns out to be 32 individual cells, which is quite generous for a tray. And that's the process. This product is made by a company called Hacksnicks. I'll link it in the description below, and it's endorsed by Pippa Greenwood, and I have to say, having used these for a number of years, I'm very impressed with what they do. There's a deeper one which I use for runner beans, and that too is very successful. What this enables us to do when we have the plants ready is simply open the clamshell cells, and each of the roots are in a nice thin tube-like formation, and we can take that out, make a hole in the ground with our dibber and slot them in really simply. And that's what we're going to use for our onions. And the reason we're going to put onions in them is that by the time I'm ready to put those onions into the ground, which is probably going to be late April, we'll be ready to sow the runner beans, which come up very quickly in the polytunnel. It's this last set of cells that put the rest of the cells in the rack under tension, and you effectively squeeze it in there, and then everything's really rooted. And if you need it, then on the top goes the propagator. So you can sow seeds directly into these cells. In this instance, I'm going to use them to transplant my seedlings, so I probably won't be using this, but if you want to use them from the get-go, then that's a great way of propagating. So now we get to the part where we need to water this compost so that it's moist, ready to receive the seedlings. And I use this technique of adding some super strength seaweed extract. This is made by Neudorf. It actually indicates that you can use it for seedlings and young shoots, and the dilution is 10 mils of the extract with 1 litre of the water, and you then just add this to the compost. In reality, I think that 10 mils for 1 litre is probably a little too strong for very young seedlings, so I half that and use 10 mils in 2 litres of water, and I believe that that gives me a better result. So super strength seaweed extract is the secret sauce. So this bottle has a handy cap on the top, which you take off, take the lid off, and it's calibrated in 5 ml sections, so we're going to use 10 mils. It's very black and probably stains if you get it on you, so be careful. There we are. There's a few drops going onto the tray, and then we're going to add that straight in to the water. Pop the lid back on, pop that back on, just clean up a little bit and give it a good stir, and then we're good to go. Best to do this on some trays, and then you don't ruin the kitchen table. I would be very unpopular if I did that. So that's the first application of the seaweed extract, and I'll link this product below so that you can locate it. I'm going to put another application on, as you'll see shortly. So we are going to get ready for transplanting the seedlings, and what I'm going to do is put 3 holes into each of these root trainers. So we're going to have effectively 3 onions in each trainer, and that gives us a cluster that we're going to plant in due course, and that will enable us to take at least 1, maybe 2 onions when they're a little younger, and then allow 1 onion to develop further into a larger bulb. So effectively we get some spring or small onions, and then we get a mature bulb that we may want to store or eat. So each of these root trainers will give us 3 plants, and then these trays or pots I'm going to put 4 holes in, and these are the ones I'm going to put straight into the polytunnel. Call me cautious, but I'm going to try putting them into cold weather and make sure that I don't lose a load of plants in the test. So each of these different onions are going to have 4 in a pot that will go straight into the cold weather, and see by the time we get to mature plants ready to plant on into the beds whether or not that's caused them any problems at all. And if not, I'll know for the future that I can probably bypass this step of transplanting seedlings and keeping the seedlings at least indoors, if not in the warm, and go straight to the polytunnel, which will save a lot of space and probably a lot of energy too. So that's the trial. I'll label each of these up so that I can remember what they were. So the Elsa Craig is going to be these, the yellow Rheinsberg these, and the Zeebrunn shallots those. And I'm going to put the Elsa Craig, which ultimately forms a much larger bulb, into these pots so that that enables them to develop further, and the Rheinsberger and the Zeebrunn are going to go into the root trainers. So by a quick calculation, if they all succeed, there'll be 256 onions, which is more than enough for our needs. It's important to say at this point that everyone has different methods for transplanting and growing onions, and there's nothing that's right and there's nothing that's wrong. This is just my method and I'm happy to share it with you. So I'm going to add another 10 mils of the seaweed extract to another 2 litres of water. So this will be the second watering, and it just helps to open those holes up that I've made. And this is all about making it an easier job to transplant the seedlings once I've got the roots out. In the same way that you can loosen the roots of leeks in the summer when you're transplanting them into the beds, you can do the same now with seedlings by just making sure there's copious amounts of water goes onto the seedlings in the tray. And if we let that soak in and then add some more, you get to the point where the makeup of the soil is really very crumbly and enables the seedlings to be eased out that much more easily. Makes the whole job of transplanting a little bit less painful, and also protects the roots so that you're not breaking them as you're trying to get them out. So I use this method, just gives a greater deal of success and protects the plants. Here we go then, just teasing out the roots of the plants, and that's a nice onion ready to go into the first of the holes. And I'm going to use my dibber just to help it down into the hole. It's worth taking your time over this. We've come a long way from sowing them and getting to this point, so you don't want to damage them. Take your time and work through it slowly but carefully. So as I got towards the end there, I am running out of seedlings, which is fine. But I want to make sure I get these trial ones done. There's a view of the roots. You can see they're absolutely fantastic. Planting them originally, or sowing them into slightly deeper trays, I think that's what does that. You can see that in one of my earlier videos, which I will add a link to. But I think it makes a big difference. And if you can get a good root growth on any vegetable, you're giving it the very best start you can give it. And so we're going to plant these last few into these pots for the experiment, putting them straight into the polytunnel, and we'll see how they fare. It'll be very interesting to see if it has any negative impact on the growth and the final plant at the end of the sowing season, and when we're ready to plant them into the beds. So that's just one more to go, and there we have it. Now it's quite a fiddly task, but well worth the effort. So there we are. That's all the onions transplanted. It's interesting that the zebrune shallot, grown in exactly the same medium in exactly the same way as Elsa and Rheinsberg, is that much bigger. It's a really well developed seedling at this stage. The Rheinsberger looking okay, and same with the Elsa Craig. But there's no doubt about it that the zebrune is a vigorous plant. And we can see here, these are the trials that are going to go into the polytunnel. So I'm going to move on to the peppers. I'm going to transplant them in exactly the same way into individual pots, and we'll get on with that and then move them all to the Vitapod and the light garden. And there we are, job done. All the peppers sewn on into the pots, all the onions ready to be moved. Next step, get them into their next location and go from there. And there we are, the onions underneath the grow light garden. Just take a short while now for them to poke their heads back up. I'm going to have to keep a careful eye on the root trainers because I'm not convinced that the soil comes into contact with the capillary mat, and that obviously will be a problem in terms of watering. So we'll keep an eye on that. And then the peppers back into the Vitapod. I had a little bit of overflow with the Elsa Craig, so they've gone on the end. Space was ample this morning, and then by the end of the day it's at a premium. So we'll just keep an eye on all this now, and hopefully we will get success. As I said, I'm concerned that the Joe's Long pepper seed that I saved last year is not germinating in the seed tray. So I'm going to use this chitting method, and I've placed them in a plastic food container on some kitchen towel, and this is all of the seed that I have, and I'm going to dampen it all and then sandwich it between another piece of kitchen towel, dampen that, and I'll put it inside the Vitapod and see if we can get any of those to chit. I've set the onions that are going to be in the polytunnel down on the soil, hopefully with a bit of extra warmth, in quite a nice sunny spot, and I'm going to cover them over with that cloth just for some added protection, and we'll see how they do. While I was over the allotment, I thought I'd check on the temperatures of the compost heaps, and this one's a staggering 102 degrees Fahrenheit over 40 degrees centigrade. And this one just about 24 degrees centigrade and probably 78 degrees Fahrenheit.